My name is Nicole. I'm a public archaeologist with the Florida Public Archaeology Network's Northwest region, and we're out here today in Blackwater River State Forest looking for an archaeological site that was documented in historical records but has never been identified archaeologically. And so we want to see if we can find any of the remains of that site on the landscape today. As you can see, being in the state forest presents some unique challenges like the dense brush that we have to deal with to get to the sites, especially ones that are in really far-flung rural areas. This particular site was a mill site, a lumber mill site called Julian Mill, and it was active during the early 19th century, so in the pre-Civil War period. And the hope is that by finding the archaeological site, not only can we record it archaeologically, but we can also learn more about rural life and milling in this area in the early 19th century. But unfortunately today, we've been walking around for quite a while and we actually haven't seen any of those remains. And so for archaeologists, even though we haven't found anything, no data is still data. Right? So even though we didn't find the site, we'll be able to record that there are no visible remains on the landscape. One of the most difficult aspects of doing site monitoring in really rural places is dealing with the landscape. So we have to wear, obviously, protective gear as much as we can. Right now we're working early in the spring, so we don't have to deal with mosquitoes too much, but as we get closer towards the late spring and the summer, we'll have to contend with a lot of bugs out in this area.
It's permethrin, great. Bug repellent specifically for chemicals, and specifically for clothes, and it is great.
But something to think about too, because this is a somewhat wet area along the creek, we do often see snakes as well, and I think at least one of our team members ran into a cottonmouth snake while we were out here today. So we have to be really careful. We have to take first aid and safety seriously. And one of the great tools that we've been using lately in rural areas are GPS units, which have built-in emergency functions. So in places where our cell phones don't work, we're still able to call for help if we need it and communicate back with our colleagues back at the FPAN Coordinating Center. So for part of our trip today, I actually took off my boots and my socks and I waded through Julian Creek here, and it was quite cold. It's a spring-fed creek, which means that the water is coming up from the water table. In this part of Florida, that water table is typically anywhere between 65 and 68 degrees. So for someone who likes the warm water like myself, wading around in a cold spring-fed creek is chilly. So even though we weren't able to find any remains of the archaeological mill site while we've been out here, we did see a little bit of material culture on the surface. And one of the things that we were able to identify was this small bottle. It's got a square-shaped bottom. It says on the bottom, Jergens. So if you're familiar with Jergens, you know it's a cosmetics company and they do things like lotions. And so based on the bottle, the glass, and the embossing on the bottom, we know that this bottle is relatively modern, but still of archaeological significance because it's 50 years old. And it was probably produced by the Jergens company sometime between 1930 and 1950. So we'll note it in our notes, but one artifact does not make an archaeological site.